So I hope you can see now the Symbio start page. And the next 25 minutes, I will just spend time with you, making you familiar with the new version and also some new layout changes we have. So looking at Symbio, you see in the main menu some changes. In the past, we had a repository where we managed our roles, inputs, etc. And now you see the main menu changed a bit. So here, when I'm navigating or with my mouse over the main menu, you see there's no repository anymore as such. However, we still obviously have the roles and inputs and KPIs as part of Symbio. So for example, when I go to the organization, you see we have the roles now under the organizational facet, for example. When we go to the systems, you see here the IT systems, they're now called systems and not IT. Also, you see we have here requirements. Previously, they were called demands and ideas. And the trainings, which were previously in the repository, are now here in the learning facet. So those are some changes. Also, you might have seen we have a few more main facets in Symbio. So we expanded our method massively over the last 1 or 2 versions. And my colleague Rainer will dive into that method in the next slot. So for example, you see the processes are not on the very left anymore because we have now a customer section also in Symbio. So we can manage customer journey maps. You see later on what we mean with that. Also, you see we have a strategy facet where you can set up your goals for your company, also in a hierarchy, and describe them and link them with any repository objects. So you see the layout and the structure is the same we had before. You can set up your strategy or also your projects, as you can see, or products, the same way you manage your process architecture. You see, you always have the architecture and the list and the graphical view, for example. So those are the changes concerning the web surface. So as you can see, the repository as such isn't there anymore. However, you see the different repository objects now, for example, under organization or the input and output or the KPIs you see under the facet strategy. So that's a new thing. You will see when we provide you with the Symbio version 18.5. So you see here a version which is still under development. Later on, when we go to the roadmap, you see the dates when you will get, or when we have the release ready. Again, this is just a developer version I'm going to show you today. So that's the first bit, the new structure of the main menu. You've seen that now. So let's dive into 4 or 5 features which are part of the new version. One feature is was already part of the latest version, but I'm going to show that again. That's the translation. So you might remember the persons who joined the webinars a few weeks ago. We have a web service integrated in Symbio, which automatically translates you process data or repository data. So let's just dive, for example, into the organization, to the roles view. And then let's just set up a new role, for example, marketing assistant. So I better here search for it via the filtering, as there are already many roles. That's not a new function. Everybody's familiar with that one. So here's the new role. And then in the description, I can maybe write responsible for the strategy. And then the important thing is, so I'm now working in the English data language. So when you here look at the settings, under languages, I selected English as the primary and German as the secondary. So now let's translate a few words I just have written here. You see here at the top of the detail content, the button Translate. You simply click on it. Now you see a new window. On the left-hand side, the English version, the marketing assistant, and responsible for the strategy. So you see the marketing assistant in German was already translated. And now when I click on this button here, you see the description was also translated. So we are very happy with that feature, and also some of our customers are using it already. So you see, you can translate huge content by simply clicking on it, and you save, giving the translation to a agency or doing it internally. Also, the quality is very high of this web service. It's the DeepL web service. And again, the cloud customers have that as part of the Symbio setup. On-premise customers can, with a very moderate investment, also use that service. So you would just kind of buy this service on a monthly basis for a very, very moderate price. And what I've just shown you, I could have also done with the processes or with risks or input outputs or KPI. So it's applicable for all data you have in Symbio. Let's just close this and let's move on to a new feature in this version. It's called the two-level view. So there's a new process view available which shows different process graphs kind of in one browser. You see what I mean with that in a second. So for the users, it's far easier to know where you are in the process hierarchy. That's the main message behind it. So let's dive into the processes, into the graphical view. And now you see here, I'm navigating to the process human capital management, to employee management. So you see now the following. I have here the main process, human capital management, then a main process, employee management, 3 sub-processes below it, and then under the sub-process, train employees, 3 further sub-processes. Now you see here under processes, in the sub-navigation, the two-level view. So when we dive into that, you see a new view of the process is now available on the right-hand side of the browser. So when I click now on the right-hand side, for example, on train employees, you see now in one view, you see the different hierarchies you work with. So it's now very easy to know where you are in the hierarchy, making things a lot easier as they were before. So again, we are now on the left-hand side in the main process, employee management. There are 3 sub-processes below it. And when we click on train employees here on the left, you see on the right, we are in the process train employees. Also, the breadcrumbs, as we call it here, are different. And then finally, when I click on train employees here on the left, I can even go to this view that you see then the modeled sub-process on the right-hand side. Okay, so that's again a nice feature also for the viewers in order to exactly know where you are in the process hierarchy, because in the past we didn't have that. So that was a kind of a challenge in the development in order to show 2 process graphs at the same time. And it goes without saying here on the left that you can also go to for any graph which is there, also for process profiles or fact sheets. Also, the detail content would obviously automatically update when you click on one process step on the right-hand side. Good, so that's the two-level view as we call it, and you find that under processes, and then here in the sub-navigation, it's the second facet. Let's move on, going back to the start page. The next feature is the inheritance of responsibilities. So for many customers, we have received the feedback that it would be nice that the process owner should be the person who is currently logged on in Symbio. So we now have that fulfilled. I'm just logging now off as this user, logging on as this one, switching the modus from the viewer to the editor mode. And now when I go to the processes, I choose any category just to show you what I mean with that. So here under core processes, I can set up a new main process. I call it, just for time purposes, test, as you can see. And now when I click on it, you see on the right-hand side, I'm currently logged on as Peter Process. And now the author was automatically set up by Symbio as the author. So again, the person who is currently logged on and has editor right is automatically the author of the process. Also, when I maintain the responsible, could be this person, and when I set up a further process under this process, you see that also the responsible was inherited. You see now Friederike Freigeber was maintained as the responsible for this main process when a new main process was set up below it. So Symbio knows that the inheritance now should be the same author and the same responsible the process had on a higher level. Okay, so that's now a fulfillment I think every customer of ours will now really like now, because Symbio automatically sets the responsibilities. If you want to use it the way you used it before in the administration part of Symbio, you can deactivate this function. So it would then work as before, that you would just manually maintain the responsibilities. Going forward, let's talk about fact sheets. So just to show everybody what a fact sheet is for a process, I just show you what we mean with that. So a fact sheet is a additional view you have. So here it's called process profile. It's a additional view you have in Symbio. So you would just set it up as you set up the start page. You have different widgets where you can set up this view, and it's just a view, an additional view where you see a summary of the process. And so far we only had this additional view for processes. Now we also have it for your requirements, for your risks, IT systems, etc. Let's just show what I mean with that. So I'm logging on again as the administrator. And then I'm diving into the administration part via the wheel on the right-hand side. And now in the administration area, you see here fact sheets. So that's the fact sheet for the process you have just seen. So on the left, I can just set up a new fact sheet, for example, for risks. So I call it risk. Then on the right-hand side, you would choose the facet you would like to use it for. So let's go for risks. And then we want to see it for the type risk, for example. And then as the same principle with the start page, you choose the relevant facet you would like to use, for example, the list facet. Then 10 types would be listed. That's what you see here on the right-hand side. And then you maybe want to see in which processes does the risk occur. Then you choose that, and it goes to that saying you can set up many other widgets, as you can see here. Okay, so let's just go back to the risk view. And when you now go to a risk, for example, to the graphical view, you see here this fact sheet I called risk. And now you see that's how a very simple fact sheet could look like. You see here the list widget I've chosen. I wanted to show you in which process does the risk occur. And you see it does occur in the process vendor invoice in this particular step. So here you can now see a list of 10 processes, for example, with the individual steps. And from the fact sheet, you can jump into the relevant process then also. And again, that fact sheet is now applicable for any view you have in Symbio. You can also use it for your products or your systems, for example. In the past, we only had it for processes. And then last but not least, the latest or the last feature we have in this new version is the stereotype. So let's talk about stereotypes for a second. Let's just try to summarize it in simple words. It's just a new way of distinguishing between types of processes, for example, or roles or systems. So you can define stereotypes and then link it to processes or repository objects, for example. And then finally, you can also filter for them. So let's just show you what I mean with that. Let's go into the process view, for example. And you see in the sub navigation, you have here the possibility to set up a stereotype, as you can see, for a main process or a sub process, for example. So let's set one up for a main process. So the stereotype could, for example, be that it is a, I don't know, external process, just for example. So you can word or give the stereotype a name, as you can see, external. And then you can upload on the right-hand side a image. The image will then be part of the process object. So let's just upload an image. And the image could be, as you can see here, just this red triangle on the top right corner. So let's move that in here. Now you see it's here. And let's now go to the process architecture. And let's just set up a new process under, for example, core processes. For example, I don't know, risk. You select the process, and then you see on the right-hand side, you can go for the stereotype. So you link on the right-hand side the particular type of stereotype with the process. And then when you go back to the graphical view, you see here the main process risk is now part of this value-added chain or end-to-end view, whatever. And you see on the top right-hand corner of the object this red sign. So that's how you can distinguish then different types of processes, roles, risks, systems, etc. So you can set up stereotypes for any data you have in Symbio. And also the data would be then, or when you model a process and go to the detailed view and you distinguish roles between external or internal roles, or you can distinguish trainings between online or offline training, you see that then always graphically in Symbio. So that was also a demand by many customers of ours to just set up different types of processes or roles, for example. And you can do that with stereotypes, as you can see.